Louisiana lawmakers advanced two bills critics say are anti-LGBTQ. A bill from a Republican Representative Dodie Horton, which critics have called the Don't Say Gay bill, and a bill from Republican Representative Raymond Cruz were both sent to the full House for debate. Horton's bill would restrict school staff from any discussion of sexual orientation or gender identity in the classroom or in extracurriculars. And Cruz's bill would require school staff to use the names and pronouns of students found on their birth certificates. Both bills, if passed, would apply to all grade levels.
Now, we do know that there are alternate lifestyles. We're not opposing anybody's free choice. So some of the questions that may come about, but at the early age, most of those children, the formative years, they're not even thinking about sex. We believe sex should be taught in the home.
Yeah, they go to school, go to work every day to educate, to enlighten, to enhance, you know, and yet with this, they can't even have, if a child comes, an inquisitive child, and most children are inquisitive, they can't even respond to that.
Critics say the bills unfairly target LGBTQ children and teachers, and note that transgender children already suffer from elevated rates of suicide. The bill's sponsors say these bills are all about parental rights.